Welcome to Current Situation, your Palmetto State political pulse. I'm your host, Joshua Gale, alongside South Carolina State House Representative Jordan Pace. Every week, our goal is to help you navigate the complex world of politics through biblically conservative perspectives. Before we jump into today's conversation, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor.
Hey, it's Josh from the band Gale. Our new single, I Still Do, is now streaming on all major platforms. Thanks for listening.
In this episode, we're going to talk about how Jordan and the Freedom Caucus have called for a Trump agenda South Carolina budget, cutting over $1 billion from this year's budget, which is already forecasted to grow to the largest amount we've ever seen. And then we've got the 2024 scorecard, the Freedom Caucus ranked as the highest champions of conservatism, and we're going to explain that and show some different points from that. So let's go ahead and dig in. Jordan, could you recap what's happened on the House floor as far as the budget, where we're at with the budget, and then where it's headed next?
Yeah, so last week we did round one of the budget. Every year the budget starts in the House. We'll start on a Monday, which is kind of unusual for us. Typically we're a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday group. It started last Monday, and it was thus far the biggest we've seen, and could actually grow. We'll talk about how it could grow in the next month pretty significantly, and how we honestly expect it to. But it's the recurring funds is $13.3 billion. Another 1.2 or 1.3 billion in what's called non-recurring funds. Basically, they brought more money in than expected, is what non-recurring means. And with all that money coming in, the plan from Ways and Means, who has 3 Democrat chairs of subcommittees over there, one of which appropriates in their subcommittee like $400 million out of this budget. Another committee on there is 3 out of 5 are Democrats, and they appropriate over $1 billion. There's the graphic there. 1.4 billion in non-recurring. That's the number that could grow, and I'll talk about that in a second. But that's kind of what we were dealing with. We got it on our desks, and we had been, members of the Freedom Caucus have been attending Ways and Means committee meetings all year. There's subcommittee meetings where the agencies come in and give their pitch on why they need more money, so we could ask questions. We're not on we had no members on Ways and Means, no surprise there. But at least we could ask questions and get firsthand knowledge, and take away the criticism that we don't go to these meetings, we don't talk to people, and blah, 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 blah. So that's what we did. We learned, had an idea of what was coming. We officially got the brick, as we call it, which is lovely document right here. This is why we call it the brick. We got that on our desks and started digging. But now we had, like I said, we'd have been going to these meetings. We knew what was coming, had an idea for it, and knew roughly what we wanted to do. Leadership was proposing a 0.1% tax reduction, which is statutory. A few years ago, they passed that law saying we're going to reduce the income tax from what was 7 down to 6 over the course of 10 years, 0.1% at a time. The other claim that was made, and continues to be made, I think deceitfully, is that there's close to $1 billion in tax cuts, quote unquote tax cuts, proposed by the Ways and Means Committee. In reality, what that is, for our viewers or listeners that know what Act 388 was, roughly 20 years ago, the legislature passed a law that decreased your property taxes pretty significantly on the house that you live in, amongst some other stuff. Well, one of the ways that they did that is they took a portion of the sales tax to go into what they call the tax relief trust fund to pay for, quote unquote, pay for that reduction on property taxes. And it goes to a whole bunch of other stuff. And they're calling that tax cuts. These were cuts that were made, like I said, decades ago, that they're claiming credit for, that statutorily, like legally, they're obligated to move money into these accounts. So this wasn't like they suddenly got conservative and said, we want to cut taxes. What we were trying to do in the Freedom Caucus was actually cut hundreds of millions of dollars. If we had enacted all of our amendments, of which there were over 100 amendments we offered, it would have wound up cutting between $1 billion and $1.3 billion out of the budget to pay for a full percent decrease in our income tax, so taking it from 6% to 5% in one fell swoop.
Which would make us more
Had it
competitive with our neighbors.
Yes, I mean it would make us very competitive with our neighbors. Most of them. We still couldn't compete with Florida and Tennessee, which had zero income tax, but it would move us in a better direction faster, and it would let people who were right on that edge of making it and struggling, keep a few $100s more in their pockets every year, and that can go a long way. So that was the plan. In order to pay for that tax cut, we'd have had to eliminate entire agencies. For instance, the Arts Commission. We kind of made a big deal about that last year with the gummy bear statues that they give awards to. Arts Commission's, if I remember right, like $12 million a year, a little over $12 million a year. Only $3.5 million of that goes toward educational grants to like government schools and libraries and government institutions to do art education. Everything else goes to crazy stuff like the Greenville Gay Men's Chorus and the Upstate LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. Pure Theater in North Charleston got over $50,000. Spoleto, which is a kind of a fringe arts thing downtown for very, very wealthy people with very expensive tickets and stuff, they got tens of thousands of dollars. Over the years, they've got like hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Arts Commission, and they have millions of dollars in their savings accounts, like in their endowment. The Spoleto does.
Right.
So
basically,
it's right now real estate and all this other stuff. Shoot, the Gilliard Center got like $100,000. Like the Gilliard Center is very nice, but the city owns it. Like that's the Charleston City
property. That is a money pit.
Exactly. So our perspective was, look, the Arts Commission is not a core government function. It's not something we need to be doing or spending money on, and it's distracting us. If these people who work there, the handful of people that work at the Arts Commission, would be better used either given to teach in schools or working on roads. It's the same idea as the Doge idea in DC. What President Trump and Musk and his team are trying to pick through all this stuff, whether it's USAID or any other things that they're kind of dissecting and finding the things that aren't absolutely necessary, because we're in a place where people are struggling, whether it's from the Biden inflation or job market or whatever. The more money people can keep in their pocket and have that not extracted from them to fund gummy bear statue prizes. The prize that the gummy bear statues got last year, it would take a family of 4 their entire tax burden for the year for South Carolina to pay for that. Like one family paid for that out of their pocket is the reality of it. So we try to cut all those. Yeah. It is very silly. Unfortunately, none of our colleagues or very few of our colleagues agree with us. Whether it's the Arts Commission, the Sea Grant Consortium, which very few of my colleagues who voted on this even knew what that was. It's not a huge chunk of money. It's about $1.3 million, which is a lot of money to me, but for a state agency. And they push climate change studies, mostly of what they do. So we said, no, we should not spend that $1.3 million. We should go fix a bridge with it, is what we wanted to do, or put it toward a tax cut. So we at least offered those ideas over the course of 2 full days of debate. I think we got done about 12:30 in the morning Wednesday. I got home about 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. Sadly, none of them passed. My friend Jacob Martin even put up an amendment to cut a literal dime, 10 cents, from the Department of Recreation and Tourism budget. DPRT spends $24 million a year in film subsidies for Hollywood studios. And our colleagues literally wouldn't cut a dime from the budget. And so that part was disappointing. But we made the point of, if we want to cut taxes, actually historically cut taxes, we need to cut government. And there's no way around it. Because everybody talks big about, we need to lower taxes, we need to shrink government. That's what we run on as Republicans, is actually doing this stuff. Yeah, and that's what we attempted. We gave people the opportunity to do it and didn't do it. That's the bad news. Good news is we'll get another chance at it in about a month. When the Senate sends the budget back, they'll attach their earmarks to it. These are pet projects from legislators. Some of these aren't bad. Like some of these go to fire departments or police departments or sheriff's offices, necessary things. A lot of it is just waste at best. I think we talked about last year, like the $900,000 to start a podcast for the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame. And you and I both know It does not cost $900,000 to start a podcast. When the Senate sends that back, we'll have another shot to vote on the whole budget again, plus the earmarks. So we'll revisit that sometime in April.
What baffles me is that when it comes to federally or state-wise, somebody doesn't want to get a vaccine, fire and let them go. Who cares about their job? But if we find their job unnecessary or their department, and we want to cut spending for any other reason because it's our tax dollars, we're the worst people on planet Earth.
Right.
But if somebody wouldn't take a vaccine, we'll fine, just get rid of them.
That was brought up amongst the debates we had. Like I said, Democrats defended a lot of these because a lot of these were their ideas. And one of them, no, actually, I have to correct myself. It wasn't a Democrat who brought this up. It was a freshman Republican stood up and said, well, if we eliminate these agencies, what about the jobs for the people who work there? And I expected that from a Democrat, but not from a fellow Republican, because the reality is, if what they're doing isn't necessary, whether it's the Arts Commission, the Sea Grant Consortium, or whatever, they can go get a job in that same field, making more money and actually producing stuff, rather than being a burden on the economy, which is in reality what government jobs are. Some are necessary, but it is all extracting from the productive economy to get those to accomplish those things. Yeah, that part was disappointing. I'm looking forward to getting another shot at it. But yeah, that's even today as we're recording this. Otter Simmer, the guy who ran DHEC during COVID, who recommended shutting everything down, basically everything that Fauci was saying, he just kind of parroted. And still, the Department of Public Health is still advocating for kids as young as 6 months to get the COVID shot. We're, by and large, as a legislature, kind of ignored that until it was forced in our face, and the Senate's tackling that today. And I guess I think they just adjourned a few minutes ago to go into session, but they'll come back to it. That isn't what people got mad at. They got mad that we were trying to close down government agencies.
Right.
Even the Republicans.
That baffles me. And then our friends, bars and concert venues not getting any support there. So we'll continue to see some of our places where the arts flourish. So as a band, I need venues to play my art, my music, right? So forget the venues that host the artist, and let's throw millions of dollars at gummy bear statues and things that are people who claim to love the arts or support the arts. It's just a little ironic. So transitioning from that there into scorecards. So, hearing things from Republicans that sound like a Democrat would say it. A lot of the voting that happened on the House floor and in the Senate is equal sides, Democrat and Republican, uniting on a lot of this budget and these topics. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here on the scorecards released. You can tell us who released it and how to read it and why it's important.
Sure. Yeah, to your point. So this is the Club for Growth Foundation, the premier fiscally conservative organization in the country. They are active on the federal and state level. And on the state level, they do scorecards for legislators across the country. And this year's just came out yesterday. Rates some legislators on a score of 0 to 100. They go through a great detail, specific bills and how folks voted on those bills, and whether those bills are aligned with free market values. And what I think shares a lot of biblical values there of letting people be productive and not get in the way. I'm very, very happy to say that me and 7 of my colleagues got 100% rating from them. So that was encouraging. There were actually some Republicans in the House that scored lower than a few Democrats in the House, which that was enlightening.
So let me say that again for listeners. 8 House Republicans received a perfect score for their conservative voting records. All 8 were South Carolina Freedom Caucus members. Is that correct?
That's great. Yeah, we ran the numbers on that, and the average Freedom Caucus members' score was 92%. All non-Freedom Caucus Republicans, their average score was 27 out of 100. Yeah. Not great. So there's a reason South Carolina has a reputation for being the bluest red state in the country. And I think the budget vote is emblematic of that. Every Democrat voted for the budget, and they were celebrating on social media when the budget was done, like how they were very happy with the budget. And it was 13 of the most conservative members of the House that voted against it. And we had a few people that were missing that didn't vote because they weren't there. They had some family emergencies and stuff. But that is kind of telling. And the scorecard gives the data to back that up of, things are not right here, and we need some help in Columbia.
Absolutely. To your point, 34% average Republican score, 25 for a average Democrat score. That's less than 10% to make us, like you said, the most liberal conservative state in the United States.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on here, in this scorecard, you can go and you can find every House member
and Senate.
And Senate. This is the Senate votes here. So you can look at your senator, your representative, and look at their score and see if that represents you in your vote. And then we have South Carolina House on here as well.
And it goes through the description, like outside of the numbers there. Club for Growth does a really good job because they'll go back up a page or so, and it actually gives some details. Yeah, go up one more. It gives the details, so it's not just a bill number and the name. It actually describes like what the bill is about, why it was a problem, or why it was good. And so it's not just a bunch of numbers on a page. They actually do a really good job with this.
So this is something we will put the link to this document here in our show notes. So that you guys can view it for yourself, share it out, send a copy to your representative. The score, if you question the score, have them defend their score on the scorecard. Share that information. This stuff is really important. People are not spending their life or their livelihood creating this just to defame anybody. It really is a set standard, and I think a standard that we should highly consider.
Yeah, and a lot of I think there's a strong biblical connection to this. Of when we brought a lot of these issues up in the budget, crony capitalism, one of the things we tried to cut was something called Locate SC, and they asked for $150 million. They only got $92 million. And what they do is clear land and do site prep for industrial sites for private companies. So this is the state using essentially almost $100 million of your tax money to go do the work of private industry for well-connected private industries who you have no real say over. Like, that is not equal weights and measures. And it's taxing the potential competitors of those industries. It's taking money from them to give a leg up to their competitors. That is wrong. That's cronyism or crony capitalism, whatever you want to call it. That's one of the things that the Club for Growth is adamantly against. And we try to eliminate that, along with the Arts Commission and all the other stuff. And the Democrat who went up, who's the chairman of that subcommittee for all those things, his defense was, and I imagine and anticipate if folks call and ask their representative if they didn't have a good score, why it is, the defense will be similar from them as the defense from Stavronakis, the Democrat, which is the state has to invest in these things. And that's the word he kept using over and over again. The state has to invest. If the state doesn't invest in the Film Commission or Locate SC or blah, 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 then we'll lose all this money. But that's false. Like, that is categorically false. I work in commercial development. I can tell you one of the without question, the reason our water and sewer and to a large extent our roads can't keep up with the growth, the over acceleration of industrial growth and housing growth and everything else, is because we're putting hundreds of millions of dollars, or in the case of Scout Motors, $1 billion plus into what are effectively steroids for the economy. Like, this over speedy growth is unnatural and we can't keep up. One of the things we tried to add rather than subtract was for the Rural Infrastructure Commission, because their whole function is to lend money to local municipalities and counties to expand their water and sewer. And I asked that lady in the subcommittee meeting about why they can't keep up, like why these counties and cities and stuff can't keep up, if it was because of all the rapid industrial growth. And she said, yeah, that's exactly why. So with one hand, we are robbing people, essentially forcing them to pay for their competitors. And on the other hand, we're shortchanging our water and sewer and utilities and stuff for them to keep up. I think they got shorted the rural infrastructure authority. It's a hard thing to say. They got shorted like $4 million. We tried to give them that back by cutting that $80 million to locate SC, or the $191.5 million in total, and our colleagues didn't go for it. So I anticipate that their defense will be, well, we have to invest in all this stuff. You don't. Like, that is not the government's job biblically to invest in private industries, to invest in film companies. The government's job is to deliver justice for infrastructure, maybe a K through 12 education. It's a very, very limited thing biblically and constitutionally. And we're just going way outside of that. Somebody's got to take a stand to rein it in.
It's the government trying to do the job of the people and trying to do a job.
Or the job of God.
The job
in a lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing an extremely poor job at doing it. We've given everybody a lot to look into, to grill their senator and their House representative on their scorecard, but also what earmarks and what things are going into this year's budget that have no reason to be there. So there's still things that listeners can do and people can do to try to influence what gets included and not included in this year's budget. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, tell them, call your rep, tell them you don't want this wasteful spending. You don't want duplicative. We didn't even talk about the duplicative agencies like the Human Affairs Commission, $6 million a year to just duplicate what the federal government does. The Federal Equal Opportunity Commission, EEOC, when they literally contract out their job to the EEOC every year. I went and tracked that down. Try to cut that and it wouldn't do it. So tell them you don't want wasteful spending. You don't want duplicative agencies. Consolidate, cut, shrink. And that's what conservatives are supposed to be about. And we try to live that out.
Awesome. So if you want to get some of the stuff that we discuss here also comes out in some well-written articles on Substack. If you go to southcarolinafreedom.com to subscribe to that Substack, to receive emails from Jordan and the rest of the Freedom Caucus and kind of stay up to date with what's going on in real time before we have a chance to reflect on it in this podcast. But we just want to thank everybody for joining in and listening to us. Stay tuned as we come back together and we'll reflect on what was voted on in the House and the Senate and give you guys all an update of what's going on in the state of South Carolina. So thank you guys for joining in, and we look forward to sharing more with you soon.